A police tent now marks the exact spot where they discovered her body, just 50 yards off the main road. The call came in shortly after 10:30 this morning. Officers were dispatched to Snapper Point after reports of a horrifying discovery: a woman's body found face down in a blowhole. The post-mortem later revealed the grim truth. The woman had endured multiple injuries, with the most significant being several stab wounds. The news sent shockwaves through the entire neighborhood. The young woman's body was discovered inside that abandoned house you see behind me. She was found without any clothing on her lower half. The pain from an injury like that would have been excruciating. He came to their date with a knife concealed in his sleeve, and she was completely unaware of the danger. In only a few hours, her body would be found lying in the nettles of the Oxhay Woods Nature Reserve, stripped bare and washed with water. She had over 30 stab wounds to her neck, face, and head. On May 31st, 2007, in Walton-on-Thames, United Kingdom, 32-year-old Kate Beagley vanished. When she didn't arrive at work and wasn't picking up her phone, friends knew something was terribly wrong. It was completely out of character. She was a senior manager at Centrica, responsible, punctual, with a wide circle of friends. There was no way she would just disappear. Then her friends started to receive text messages sent from her phone, but while the messages were from her number, the tone felt completely wrong. The way the words were phrased was different. The voice behind the text wasn't Kate's. Inside her home, investigators uncovered a second phone. In the contact list was a man named Carl, whom she had met for a date the previous night. He was Carl Taylor, 27 years old, residing in a one-bedroom apartment in Covent Garden. He had a criminal record, was trained in martial arts, and earned a living as a soccer coach and fitness trainer. The police gave him a call. He answered immediately, telling them she had given him a lift to Twickenham. After she dropped him off, he said he took a bus, and that was the last time he saw her. But only a few hours later, his own mother provided a very different version of events. She said he arrived at her home early on the morning of May 31st, driving a Volkswagen Golf. She noticed him washing the car, which immediately struck her as strange. The vehicle was new to her. She had never laid eyes on it before. The car was Kate's Volkswagen Golf. At 6:15 that morning, he presented his mother with gift vouchers. Vouchers that belonged to Kate. They had been taken from the glove compartment of her vehicle. He then sold her phone to one of his acquaintances. He even boasted to others about his new car. Cameras later showed Kate's vehicle near Chiswick Bridge around midnight on May 30th. The car was moving in the opposite direction of her home, and its movements were erratic, unsteady, and seemed almost frantic. When brought in for questioning, he was evasive at first, but then he simply went silent. Every single question was met with the same response: no comment. He was arrested for suspected kidnapping, which was later elevated to suspected murder, and still he said nothing. His detention was extended, but his silence continued. Security cameras captured him at a petrol station with Kate's body in the trunk of the car. He purchased just £1 worth of fuel, only £1. Just think about that for a moment. On Sunday evening, he placed a call to his mother. Following that phone call, he confessed. He admitted he intended to steal her car, and when she resisted, he stabbed her in the throat. He continued stabbing her, he said, because she reached for his face as if trying to fight back. He then led the police to Oxhay Woods near Watford. At 3 in the morning, her body was located. She had been undressed and washed down with bottled water that had been inside her own car. He claimed he had tossed the knife from the vehicle somewhere along the motorway. It was later found. Her blood was still on the blade. The autopsy confirmed the presence of more than 30 stab wounds and ruled out any possibility of self-defense. During the trial, he altered his account, claiming that she had taken her own life, but he refused to elaborate on how that could have happened. After deliberating for less than 2 hours, the jury delivered their verdict: guilty. He received a life sentence with a minimum term of 30 years. But the entire horrifying ordeal began with one single evening, one date, and a knife he deliberately brought with him. To properly understand this story, we must return to the very beginning. Walton-on-Thames, United Kingdom, is a small town located in the county of Surrey in England's southeast. The town is situated on the River Thames and has a peaceful atmosphere, feeling almost separate from the rest of the world. It features a broad waterfront, perfect for long walks, and a lovely promenade with benches where people can sit and gaze at the water. In the town's center are small hotels, cozy cafes, and local shops providing everyday necessities. The area is so compact, you can get almost anywhere on foot. The local train station provides direct connections to other significant towns in the area, including London. The atmosphere here is quiet and consistent, no wild nightlife, nothing chaotic, just a deep sense of peace. By the way, I'm genuinely curious about where my audience is from. Where are you watching this, and what time is it for you right now? Go on and drop your location in the comments, and while you're at it, I'll continue with the story. In this tranquil, picture-perfect town, a woman was suddenly declared missing. 32-year-old Kate Beagley had not shown up for her job. Silence. That was the first sign something was off. Her father, aware she had been out the previous evening, felt a growing unease and drove to her apartment to ensure she was safe. He arrived to an empty home, and his concern deepened upon learning she had failed to show up for a scheduled appointment. This was completely out of character for Kate. A gut feeling told her father this was serious, compelling him to contact the authorities and file a missing persons report. The official investigation, however, was just one part of the search effort. Her friends mobilized their own search parties, plastering the neighborhood with flyers in the desperate hope that a stranger might have seen something, anything. In those early days of social media, they leveraged the fledgling platform Facebook, creating a group to share information and amplify their search. Kate was remembered as an exceptional person, driven, warm, always radiant with a smile, and the kind of steadfast friend you could rely on when life got hard. Her professional life was a testament to her ambition. Through pure dedication, she had ascended to the senior position of National Compliance Manager at Centrica, a FTSE 100 gas company. She was surrounded by a large group of friends and had a deep love for traveling. While she possessed a spirit hungry for adventure and was always ready for the next discovery, she was also remarkably responsible and level-headed. The notion that she would just vanish without a word to anyone was inconceivable. It contradicted the very essence of who she was. Although Walton-on-Thames was typically a tranquil community where major crime was an anomaly, a disturbing local case cast a long shadow over the town. It was the abduction and murder of Millie Dowler. Millie Dowler, a 13-year-old schoolgirl, was snatched in Walton-on-Thames in March of 2002. Her body was discovered several months later. Her killing horrified the entire country and dominated the news for years as the frustrating manhunt for her attacker wore on. It was years before he was finally identified, and by that point, he was already serving time for 2 other murders and 1 attempted murder. On June 23, 2011, Levi Belfield was convicted for the abduction and murder of Millie Dowler. He was given an additional life term, a whole life order, which meant he would never have a chance at parole. But when Kate vanished, Millie's killer was still a free man. So authorities faced a dual crisis: investigating Kate's disappearance while trying to manage a terrified public, fearing the worst had happened again. Then, a strange new development emerged that immediately raised alarms. Texts began arriving from Kate's phone to her friends, but the messages themselves felt alien and wrong. Everyone has a distinct way of texting, a unique digital fingerprint of phrases and habits. These messages had none of her hallmarks. The tone was off, filled with expressions she would never use. The puzzle grew when a search of her apartment uncovered a second, unknown cell phone. Detectives with the Missing Persons Unit examined the device and started to dial numbers from its contact list. One of those calls connected them to a man she had apparently been with on the very night she disappeared. Her friends knew next to nothing about him, other than his name was Carl and she had met him at a club in central London a few weeks before. Was it possible she had gone home with him? Her family thought that was highly unlikely. This raised the pressing question: who exactly was this man, Carl? His name was Carl Taylor. For roughly the past 8 years, he had resided in a one-bedroom apartment in Covent Garden. He had a police record, though it didn't initially suggest a violent history. In 2002, he was found guilty of obtaining property through deception. During that same year, he had also tried to end his life by jumping off a bridge. Thankfully, he was successfully talked down. After his mother begged him to get help, he underwent a psychiatric evaluation. On the second phone discovered in Kate's apartment, investigators found text messages exchanged between the two of them. They were coordinating a meetup. This wasn't a random encounter, it was planned. The opening hours of any missing person case are absolutely vital. That initial time frame can make or break an investigation, so the police knew they couldn't afford any delays. Having nothing to lose by calling him, they dialed his number. To their surprise, he picked up. He readily confirmed he was the man she had met and claimed she had given him a lift to Twickenham. According to his account, he then hopped on a bus to go home and never laid eyes on her again. But that story was already starting to unravel. When police questioned his mother, she told them that during the early morning of May 31st, the very day Kate went missing, he had turned up at her residence driving an unfamiliar car, a Volkswagen Golf. She'd never seen the vehicle before. Stranger still, he was busy washing it. So when they presented him with this fact, he concocted a new story. He got the car from some woman. He insisted she needed it cleaned to take her children to school. But it was a complete fabrication. The Volkswagen Golf belonged to Kate, and she was gone. If she had simply dropped him off as he claimed, how did he end up with her car? And if there was some perfectly reasonable explanation, why did he fail to contact police the moment he heard she had vanished? As detectives probed further, they would soon find out the Volkswagen was not the only one of Kate's possessions in his keep. At 6:15 that same morning, he did something peculiar. He gave his mother a stack of gift vouchers that didn't belong to him. They came from the glove box of Kate's car. Beyond that, he also managed to sell a phone to one of his friends. That phone, it would soon be discovered, belonged to Kate. And to top it all off, he was boasting to people about his brand new car. A deeper dive revealed that her car was spotted just before midnight on May 30th. It was recorded crossing Chiswick Bridge, heading away from Kate's home, and being driven in a wild and unpredictable manner. In fact, the driving was so erratic that one officer had already spotted the vehicle and checked its details on the National Police database. With each hour that ticked by, the situation grew more grim. It was becoming distressingly obvious that Kate had probably met with serious harm. Carl Taylor was a 27-year-old who practiced martial arts and made a living as a soccer coach and fitness trainer. He was incredibly fit and powerful, meaning he could have easily overpowered Kate without much of a struggle. The police concluded it was time to bring him in for an official interview. If this was all just one colossal misunderstanding, if he was genuinely uninvolved in Kate's disappearance, this was his chance to set the record straight. But there was a catch. A big one. The man who had been so quick to pick up the phone that morning had suddenly gone radio silent, ignoring all incoming calls. It's common knowledge in the United Kingdom that police calls typically come from a withheld or unknown number. So it was highly likely he knew exactly who was attempting to get in touch. The officers changed their approach, calling instead from a private mobile. Instantly, Carl answered. He gave them the exact same account of what happened, sticking to his original story. But when pressed for any specifics, he remained evasive and danced around the details, offering nothing of substance. They informed him that 2 officers would be traveling to London to get a formal statement, as his vague phone call was far from reassuring. That's when he made a truly unsettling suggestion. He asked if they could just meet him at a party he was going to that night, at an apartment in Holland Park. A party. The woman he'd just been on a date with was missing, and he'd been caught driving her car without a plausible reason. Despite all this, his demeanor was entirely casual, as if nothing was wrong. That alone was a massive red flag. When the officers showed up, they pulled him into another room for a private chat, but speaking with him in person did nothing to calm their suspicions. Actually, it only amplified them. He was just as cagey and non-committal, artfully avoiding direct answers to their questions. All the while, The party was getting into full swing, with more guests arriving and drinks being poured generously. To put it plainly, it was the worst possible environment for conducting a police interview. Carl's attitude was also starting to sour. He became noticeably annoyed and increasingly tense, his voice taking on a sharper edge. The officers began to worry about their own safety. The call was made. He was to be arrested and transported back to Walton-on-Thames. Given the potential safety risk, they requested assistance from the Metropolitan Police Service. While they waited for backup, the supervising detective sergeant devised a clever ruse, inventing a reason to lure Carl outside and guide him toward the police car. Carl, seemingly oblivious to the trap being set, walked downstairs with the officer and calmly sat down in the vehicle. It was at that moment he was officially arrested for the suspected kidnapping of Kate Beagley, then driven back to Walton and secured in a holding cell. The case was escalated to the Major Crime Unit under the command of Detective Chief Inspector Mark Preston. Every second counted. If any hope remained of finding Kate alive, they had to get answers from him, and fast. Yet his story remained unchanged. Meanwhile, there was still no sign of Kate. No calls, no sightings, not a single clue. Faced with this reality, investigators made a grave decision. They would rearrest Carl Taylor, this time on suspicion of her murder. During the next interview, he changed his tactic entirely and simply refused to cooperate. Every question they asked received the exact same two-word reply: no comment. The police secured a warrant to hold him longer, buying more time for interrogation. But it made no difference. His response never wavered. No comment. He wouldn't say why he was in possession of her car. He wouldn't explain why security footage showed him filling it up at a gas station. And that's where things got even weirder. He had only purchased 1 pound's worth of petrol. Just 1 pound. What could that possibly achieve? Slowly but surely, the pieces of evidence were forming a very dark narrative. It was all circumstantial, to be sure, but the weight of it was immense. The investigators knew they needed something definitive they had to make him break his silence. He was escorted back to his cell and left in solitude, forced to contemplate the mountain of evidence they had just presented to him. On Sunday evening, they permitted him one final call to his mother, after which they decided to attempt one more interview. At this stage, Detective Chief Inspector Mark Preston had been on his feet for over 24 hours straight. Utterly depleted, he finally headed home to catch a few hours of sleep. But the second his head touched the pillow, the phone began to ring. The breakthrough came at the station. Carl Taylor finally broke. He didn't just confess to the murder. He offered to lead police directly to her body. The story he told was chillingly detached and utterly horrifying. His reason? He just wanted her car. That was his entire motive. He went after her, but she refused to give in. For fighting for her life, he stabbed her repeatedly. He recounted to police, "She was shoving me, clawing at me, so I put the knife in her throat. I just kept slicing at her neck over and over," he claimed, "because she was going for my face." But investigators weren't buying it. His story was full of holes. This was a man who dwarfed her in physical strength, a man with training in martial arts. It raised a crucial question that lingered with everyone. Why would he need a blade against a woman he could have so easily subdued with his bare hands? His justification made no sense to investigators. Still, he gave them a location, claiming he dumped her body somewhere near Watford in Hertfordshire. The authorities immediately reached out to the Hertfordshire Constabulary, setting a joint operation in motion. Moving him to the location was anything but a routine trip. It was a high-stakes, meticulously controlled police operation. Every moment of the journey, both video and audio, was captured to safeguard any potential evidence. He remained under caution the entire time. Their priorities were twofold: keep everyone safe and prevent any possibility of escape. Long after midnight, the convoy set off toward Watford. From the back of the car, Carl guided them, and the question on every officer's mind was whether this was the end of the search or just another one of his cruel games. He directed them into a parking lot for a nature reserve known as Oxy Woods. The darkness was absolute, the silence unnerving. Visibility was almost zero. Carl exited the car, making his way toward a dense patch of stinging nettles. A detective followed, carefully choosing a different route to avoid disturbing the path the killer had just walked, intent on preserving the integrity of the scene. And in the heart of those woods, the desperate search for the missing woman reached its tragic conclusion. At 3 that morning, they found her. Deep within the woods, they uncovered Kate's body. She had been stripped of her clothes. The scene was instantly cordoned off as forensic specialists started the methodical, grueling task of gathering evidence, knowing every single inch of the area had to be scrutinized. No detail could be overlooked. In a heart-wrenching statement from her family, her parents, Alan and Claire, and her brother Guy, remembered Kate as a loving and caring soul, someone who was always there for you, fiercely devoted, and immensely popular. A daughter, sister, granddaughter, godmother, and friend, whose entire world revolved around her family and the people she held dear. Their message concluded, Kate's absence will be felt every single day, in every single moment, by all of us who knew her. Flowers soon flooded the scene, an ocean of them. The community was rocked to its core. One note left among the tributes read, I didn't have the privilege of meeting you, but somehow I feel like I've known you forever. My deepest sympathies are with all those lucky enough to have felt your love and your friendship. This world is a lesser place now that you're gone. The condition of Kate's body was so severe, compounded by the hot weather speeding up decomposition, that an immediate visual identification was simply out of the question. Confirmation would have to come from DNA analysis. He had removed her clothes and washed her body. His explanation was as strange as it was disturbing. I wanted to give her a spiritual cleansing, he said, and leave her open to the stars. But beyond her body, the initial search of the woods yielded nothing. A thorough sweep of the area failed to turn up the murder weapon or any of Kate's possessions. It was later revealed that after dumping her body, Carl Taylor had tossed the knife out of her car window as he drove down the motorway. Incredibly, against all odds, search teams managed to find not only the weapon but also some of her discarded clothing. Kate was known for keeping bottles of water in her car, and those were found as well. It became clear he had used some of them to wash her. Forensics confirmed her blood was on the blade of the knife, but a crucial piece was still missing. Her car, which could hold a treasure trove of evidence. Carl offered to take them to it. He claimed to have abandoned it in a residential area in southwest London, and when officers arrived, it was right where he said it would be. The autopsy results painted a truly gruesome picture. She had endured over 30 stab wounds, concentrated on her neck, her face, and her head. The revelation shattered her family, plunging them into an unimaginable depth of grief. To lose a daughter, a sister, and a friend with such savage violence left them with agonizing questions. Why that many wounds? What could possibly explain that degree of brutality? So, what was the real story of what unfolded that night? The same man who had stonewalled them was now willing to walk them through the crime. He led them back to the pub in Richmond Hill, the site of his first date with Kate. Directly across the street, an embankment lined with benches overlooked the Thames. Carl pointed to one of those benches and told them that was where the attack began. A search of the area uncovered bloodstains on the ground, on the steps, and even on the railings that led back in the direction of the pub. Forensic analysis confirmed the blood belonged to Kate. With the full weight of the evidence against him, Carl Taylor was officially charged with the murder of Kate Beagley. But then came the stunning twist. In court, despite his detailed confession and the mountain of forensic evidence, he entered a plea of not guilty. His story was that he'd acted to defend himself, even going so far as to suggest Kate had ended her own life. It was a claim he never could quite substantiate. To build a more robust case, police went back to the nature preserve where her body was found, meticulously searching for any detail they might have originally overlooked. Since investigators were exploring a possible sexual motive, they gathered more than 100 used condoms from the area, subjecting every last one to testing. Not a single one held any DNA from Carl or from Kate. It later came to light that while incarcerated, Carl had struck up a friendship with Levi Belfield, the individual convicted for the murder of Millie Dowler. What wasn't widely known at the time was his secret connection to Mark Dixie, the killer central to the Sally Ann Bowman case. According to Laura Richards, who previously led the homicide prevention unit at Scotland Yard, the three men were effectively consulting with each other before their trials, hoping to find ways to cheat the system. She detailed how Levi Belfield and Mark Dixie forged a bizarre alliance while in neighboring cells at Belmarsh Prison, with Carl eventually joining their circle. The trio allegedly conspired to deceive prison psychologists, employing rehearsed tactics and learned behaviors to project specific personas. All three of them were slated to be tried at the Old Bailey in London, their cases scheduled only weeks apart. The trial unfolded at the Old Bailey, the legendary Central Criminal Court that has been the stage for some of Britain's most grave and sensational criminal cases. And then it was Carl Taylor's moment to face the court, with the public gallery packed with spectators hungry for justice, all while he clung to his claims of innocence. The prosecution repeatedly reminded the courtroom that he had already admitted to killing Kate, an admission that the forensic findings fully corroborated. The jury was informed that Carl and Kate's first encounter was on May the 18th at the CC Club in Piccadilly, right in the heart of London. A few weeks on, they set up a formal date at a pub on Richmond Hill where witnesses noted she seemed withdrawn and distant. She was barely paying him any mind. One observer later recounted to the police, the second they sat down, the girl just looked down and started texting. There was practically no conversation. He did all the talking. She just kept on typing. She was still on her phone even when they were walking. They eventually made their way to a bench by the embankment, and it's here that the narrative takes a sinister, premeditated turn. Carl had come armed with scissors and a kitchen knife, which he had hidden up his sleeve. This was not a spontaneous act, nor was it born from panic. This was forethought. At his trial, Carl Taylor opted to take the stand in his own defense. He described Kate to the court as kind and sweet, but then alleged she was in a state of emotional turmoil and had planned to end her own life. He claimed he did everything in his power to stop her, but the medical examiner's findings painted a starkly different picture. Her wounds were so severe that it would have been physically impossible for her to have caused them herself without collapsing or losing consciousness. The placement, the force, and the sheer quantity of the wounds were completely inconsistent with his account. At a pivotal moment, the prosecutor rolled up a sheet of paper to fashion a makeshift knife. He offered it to Carl, challenging him to demonstrate for the judge, the jury, and the entire gallery how Kate could have possibly stabbed herself over 30 times in her face, head, and neck. Carl refused, but the judge, Mr. Justice Forrester, intervened, making it clear that Carl did not direct the court's proceedings and must comply. His eventual attempt to enact his story was described as nothing short of absurd and humiliating. It was a performance completely detached from reality. Then he told the court she was stabbing at her own neck while pulling her hair, making her head move. I didn't know what to do. I just froze in shock. Once I knew she was gone, I cried. I just lay there on the grass, looking up into the sky. But his own testimony of what happened next contradicted any claim of shock or confusion. He dragged her body back to her own car. This was no fleeting impulse. It was a purposeful action, one that required strength, focus, and self-control. He was no longer just reacting. He was making a conscious effort to remove himself from the crime, a contrast that is difficult to reconcile. Consider the silence surrounding him, the ambient sounds of the night, with normal life continuing just out of sight, while in that single spot, something truly monstrous had occurred. When security cameras filmed him pulling into a petrol station to buy just 1 pound's worth of fuel, Kate's body was in the boot of the car. From the outside, the scene was utterly unremarkable. Just a car pulling up to a pump. A swift transaction, no sign of urgency, no visible panic, but that footage was absolutely chilling because at that very second, the car contained the evidence of a horrific killing. In the courtroom, that specific detail landed with incredible weight. It suggested a person who was acting calmly and methodically, not an individual overwhelmed by shock. During the proceedings, it was also revealed that Carl Taylor had composed a letter to Kate's family from his cell at the Staines police station. "My name is Carl. I'm the man who took your daughter on a date on Friday evening. Honestly, my first take on her was that she was a kind soul, but a deeply unhappy one. That was the impression she left on me, even in the brief time I spent with her. I came to see her as an angel caught in the shadows. Even though Katie is gone, her light endures, shining like a star against the dark canvas of night. I may be responsible for taking your daughter's life, yet we all sense, some more deeply than others, that her heart lives on in the kindness we show, and her spirit survives in the memories we treasure. For a long time, my own life has felt like it wasn't mine, broken by things that shattered my heart. But your lives must carry on, and I say this with the deepest respect. Katie will be far more than a memory. She will be a true wellspring of joy. She is the very proof that angels walk among us, even if they sometimes have to go back to heaven. We inhabit a world filled with personal struggles, and those who try to choose goodness are often met with rejection. What I did was, without any doubt, terribly wrong. But I want you to ask yourselves, whose life did I truly extinguish? I don't expect this letter to take away your suffering. But when the birds sing in the spring and the flowers return, let your thoughts turn to Katie. May the love you have always had for her, and always will, beat in your chests like a constant drum, a rhythm that began the first time she opened her eyes. When the ache of missing her becomes too much, look up at a star. And I promise you, as I have witnessed myself, she will be there shining, and she will remain in your hearts forever. Remember, you have not lost her any more than she has lost you. Sometimes a flower doesn't need to be touched to blossom. The detectives who found that letter faced a careful and exceptionally hard decision. They elected not to give it to Kate's family. They knew that its words could inflict an even greater wound on people who had already lost everything imaginable. After the trial, after all the ghastly details were laid bare in court, the family didn't need to suffer another blow. So, the letter stayed in the official case file, never reaching the people it was meant to console. Less than 2 hours after the jury left to deliberate, a profound quiet descended on the courtroom. Every person's gaze was fixed on the door behind which Carl Taylor's fate hung in the balance. Time seemed to crawl by, agonizingly slow. 2 hours stretched into an eternity. When the jury returned, their faces were solemn and controlled. The verdict was read with clarity and conviction. Guilty. That one word sliced through the tense silence of the room. As the decision was read, shouts erupted. Emotions that had been suppressed for months finally broke their restraints. For some, it was a wave of relief. For others, it was pure anger. And for many more, it was the tears that had been waiting for this exact moment. The pressure built from months of uncertainty, terror, and sorrow exploded all at once. He was given a life sentence with a minimum term of 30 years. This meant he would be ineligible to even ask for parole until he had served those full 30 years. The court had delivered its judgment, but for Kate's family, there could be no true finality. Then, Mr. Justice Forrester faced him and declared, "I am satisfied this was a murder committed for gain. You went to see this young woman while you were carrying a knife. She was only looking for friendship from you. You exploited her good nature for your own selfish reasons." Carl tried to protest. "No, Your Honor, I did not," but the judge was unmoved and continued firmly, "The use of that knife was premeditated. You carried it with you and kept it hidden. And after you committed this despicable crime, you moved her body and coldly concealed it." The judge also called Carl arrogant, manipulative, and a severe danger to others. The location where her body was discovered is now covered by a police tent. It's approximately 50 yards from the main road. This particular spot is known by locals as a nature reserve, located directly beside a private housing development. The woods here are a popular place for joggers and dog walkers. Once the verdict was delivered, Kate's father came out of the courthouse to speak to the waiting media. Today, that spot near where she died is marked with bouquets of flowers. One card reads, "We miss you, Kate, and wish you were still this side of the rainbow." At the end of this lengthy and incredibly complex case, 7 detectives from Surrey Police, along with an analyst from the Metropolitan Police Service, were officially commended for their relentless and draining work. For months on end, they conducted meticulous checks, carried out countless interviews, and did exhaustive forensic reviews. Bit by bit, they reconstructed the entire chain of events. Their work required sharp minds, immense patience, and an absolute commitment to detail. And ultimately, it brought about justice. Deputy Chief Constable Craig Denholm stated, "This was a complicated investigation that crossed 3 different police jurisdictions and involved several crime scenes. It demanded seamless coordination between the different forces, the sharing of information in real time, and the scrupulous investigation of every potential lead. Securing a life sentence with a 30-year minimum is a powerful tribute to the extraordinary teamwork of the officers involved." He highlighted that the case didn't just require professionalism. It required unwavering persistence. Every last piece of evidence, every digital trace, every single witness statement, it was all painstakingly reviewed and systematically analyzed with nothing ever being rushed. It was precisely that methodical and unwavering investigation that secured the harshest possible penalty from the court: sentence. The horror Kate was forced to endure in her final moments is the stuff of the most terrifying nightmares. This was more than a crime. It was an exhibition of savagery that is difficult to comprehend, let alone come to terms with. When you truly let yourself imagine what she experienced at the very end, a profound coldness washes over you. Every piece of this narrative deepens that sense of dread, that utter powerlessness, and the heavy, chilling quiet that follows a tragedy. And the chillingly composed manner in which he handled her body afterward only magnifies the monstrosity of his actions. There was no sign of haste or disorder, only a terrifying control and a series of deliberate actions to conceal his deed. He was creating distance from the scene where a vibrant human being, someone with hopes and a future, had just had her life stolen. And that is the most chilling aspect, because it doesn't suggest a loss of control. It reveals a conscious choice. For that, he was given a life sentence, ineligible for parole for at least 30 years. The court had spoken. The final verdict was delivered. And while a punishment was declared, no court order can return Kate. No number of years on a legal document can ever fill the space she once occupied. Her family, however, is now enduring their own life sentence, one that will never end. Each day for them begins with the same stark truth, the same person missing, the same silence that will never again be filled by her voice. The world keeps turning, but grief doesn't adhere to a timeline. From this kind of pain, there is no parole. There isn't a day marked on a calendar when things are supposed to get better. In the words of Kate's father, Alan, "I feel hollow and cold, and I know that feeling will never go away." Kate had such a vibrant spirit, so much energy. What was she thinking in those last seconds during such a vicious attack? An unthinkable terror, complete confusion. The fallout from this one act of violence has permanently broken so many lives. My wife can't find solace anywhere. All she sees for the rest of her life is a barren and empty road ahead.